good to be alive in this land of ours. Good to drive in this land of ours.
Hello, Canada hockey fans in the United States.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hockey Time Machine. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. 1 week from today, it's back live and in person, the Toronto Sport Card and Memorabilia Expo. We've assembled our own collection of hockey stuff experts to share both their treasures and their experiences. And we're going to start with Steve Menzie, who is owner of the Toronto Expo. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Glenn. Good to be here.
The show runs 4 days, November 11th through 14th. More than 200 dealers and corporate booths, rare cards, sports memorabilia, spread over 100,000 square feet. So give us the lowdown, Steve. What will we see? Who's going to be there? Where is it? How to get in, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, let's see. He basically made.
See, Steve did virtual expos, and during the pandemic,
preview night
Thursday.
Pardon me?
Oh, you froze up momentarily, so I was vamping,
okay.
But please go ahead.
Okay, so we've added a Thursday night dealer and VIP preview event. So that's new. First time we've done that. And to your point, we actually have now we're over 250 dealers, and we're more like 120,000 square feet. So the whole process has been pretty interesting because up until 3 weeks ago, we only had the capacity of 1,000 people. So I didn't get any more dealers in until we had more capacity, which now we're at full capacity. So there's a lot of what people are used to. It's been a couple of years, and there you go, some shots from the floor. Yeah, we've got a great guest list again. We've got a lot of new dealers. It seems that a lot of new people have come into the hobby since the last Expo in 2019, and a lot of our regular supporters are there at all levels, dealers, sponsors, and some of the big hobby corporations. So a great stage schedule. Hockey Time Machine included will be making an appearance.
Looking forward to it. The Toronto Expo has been around since the 90s. You bought it in 2016. Why?
Well, it's a great question. Prior to been running actually Expo, Canada's Comic-Con, and a number of shows in that space. And during that time, we had actually, as part of the expansion of Fan Expo, at the Sports Expo was a way of increasing the exposure of Fan Expo. That had reasonable success, but during that time, I met the founder and previous owner, Al Sinclair, and we stayed in touch. And then when I moved on from the Comic-Con world, I approached Al, and he was interested in selling, and I was interested in buying. So it worked out. It's been a great education for me.
I'll bet. And you made an interesting comment about yourself. Quote, "I'm not the target fan of the show." So tell me what you mean.
Well, up until a few weeks ago or a few months ago, I could honestly say I wasn't a collector. I mean, that's changed a little. Pandemic, I find myself sitting on a few Gretzkys and or rookies and that sort of thing. But that's mostly what I meant, is that I've never been a collector, but before I ran Comic-Con, I didn't know anything about that space either. But there's a lot of similarities and crossover. Most notably is how passionate the respective fan bases are.
Here's high praise about the Expo. And this is from the writers at puckjunk.com. Quote, you would be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't have a good time while in attendance. And to that point, you've created a show that appeals both to fans and collectors. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's been really important from the get-go. And, you know, one of the biggest things I learned over the time of the pandemic was just truly very passionate community. But it's also one that relies heavily on, you know, bringing
Well, I'm going to interpret what Steve is saying till he comes back. He's saying that the show's been good, but now that Hockey Time Machine is a part of it, he expects an explosion of interest, unlike anything anyone at any expo for any reason has seen before.
Yep. I have to apologize. I'm having a bit of a technical issue here. I don't know if I'm live or not.
Well, I tell you what, Steve, why don't we do this? Why don't we continue our conversation in a few minutes? I'll bring in another one of my guests and give you time to see if you can do this without having to do it on the fly while we're talking. So we will get back to you. Steve, by the way, said that was going to be just fine with him. Well, that's what he would have said if you could hear him. So let me move ahead to page 3. We move a 2-hour drive southeast of Toronto to Buffalo, New York, where John Boutette's influence can be found all over the Buffalo sports scene as a phys teacher or a phys ed teacher, one of those two, an archivist, a board member of the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame, and as owner and curator of the unofficial Buffalo Sports Museum. Hello, John.
Glenn, how are you?
Okay, doing just fine. Now, where exactly is this Buffalo Sports Museum?
Well, it's about 15 feet underground in my basement in Grand Island, New York, which is just south of Niagara Falls, just north of Buffalo.
So 2 years after you built your house, you and 2 buddies converted your basement into this museum. But for people who can't make it to your basement, you did this for them, a book titled Buffalo's Got the Spirit, Growing Up, a Crazy Buffalo Sports Collector. So tell me about the book and what's in it.
Well, one of the biggest questions I always got was, when are you going to write a book about all this? And I am not a writer. Let me say that first and foremost. But I am an archivist, and I'm pretty organized. So I finally got up the gumption. I saw Mike Wilson's book on Toronto Maple Leafs memorabilia, and I got inspired by Mike. And I said, if Mike can do it, I think I can give it a shot. Mine was going to be a little more difficult in the fact that I collect all Buffalo sports memorabilia, not just one particular team. So what I did is I broke the book down on my collection. Talked about collecting ticket stubs as a young boy in the odd. Talked about programs, going to games at War Memorial Stadium, documenting programs, buying programs, pennants that you buy at the game, game used jerseys later in life. When you get a little bit more money, you can afford to buy some game used jerseys. So what I did is I broke it down by category, took a lot of pictures, and talked about my experiences collecting all this wonderful paraphernalia.
We're going to take a tour now via pictures. And John, I'll have you describe the significance of some of these items. You have a special place in your heart for the Bison. who won titles in 2 different minor leagues. So tell me about them.
Yeah, I mean, I just really adore the whole Bison story from the International League days back in the early 1930s, all the way up to the American Hockey League days of the 1940s to the 1970 season. And quite simply, Buffalo would not have an NHL team without the Bisons. So I think the team has been sorely lacking in respect. I still to this day don't understand why they don't have a banner hanging in the arena in downtown Buffalo. So we made our own banner celebrating their championships and hang it in our museum here in Grand Island.
Do you know why their logo was a Pepsi-looking bottle cap?
Yeah, in the 1950s, the Pastor family, Pastor, right here in Buffalo, New York, they own the Pepsi-Cola bottling franchise, and they bought the hockey team and thought, what a great idea! Let's just use the Pepsi cap, take out Pepsi, and put in script Buffalo, and we'll use that as our logo. And that turned out to be, I think, the first use of a product logo for a professional sports team.
Good. Another mystery solved. Now, in contrast to the rich history of the Bison, if you look in the lower left of this photo, you'll see the Norsemen. The Buffalo Norsemen lasted just 1 season. So what's their story?
Well, I mean, the North American Hockey League was in existence throughout the 1970s, and Buffalo at that point was a hotbed for hockey. Amateur hockey, and then by that point the Sabres were on fire, making the Stanley Cup Finals in '75. So it made sense to bring a minor league team here to Buffalo, and right in Tonawanda, North Tonawanda, New York, just north of Grand Island. They played at the Tonawanda Sports Center, and they were in the North American Hockey League for 1 year. They competed. They ended up losing to the Johnstown Jets in their playoff series. But I think more importantly, they helped influence the movie Slapshot. Many of the scenes you see in Slapshot happened in a game between the Johnstown Jets and the Buffalo Norsemen. Very, very fun team, and not enough memorabilia exists from the Norseman year.
And even the uniforms were kind of copied. I believe what you see in the movie of the Hyannisport Presidents looks like a Norseman sweater.
Yeah, almost identical. They used just about everything. Slapshot, when they wrote Slapshot, I believe they went around the league and followed the teams around the league that year and jotted notes down about jersey colors and everything else. And that played out well in the movie. The North American Hockey League was a fun league, and we're very proud to have a team that was in that league.
Now on to the Sabres and an untorn ticket from their first season. Now, this is a rarity, right?
Yeah, when the Sabres were born in 1970, they only seated 10,000 people. The odd was built for minor league hockey, not National Hockey League. So there's only 10,000 seats. The balcony had yet to be put in. And tickets that night were a premium. I mean, can you imagine? Everybody wanted to go to the first Sabres game. And this came from a gentleman who knew the backdoor usher at the Odd, where the parking ramp was. And he begged this guy, please do not tear this. I really want to keep this for posterity. And he obliged. And it's the only one that I know of that's still in existence. I found a couple of stubs from the game, but never an untorn one. And that's the only one that I believe still exists.
And now there's not even tickets to keep anywhere.
No. It's so sad. It really is. It's I guess it's gone kind of the way of the roadmap. You don't need a roadmap anymore, and I guess you don't need paper tickets anymore either. Everybody just flashes their phone, and I think it's sad because ticket collecting is a very, very big thing to collect. I mean, there's a lot of passionate ticket stub collectors. The artwork, the color, it just was a wonderful, sign of the times, and it's sad that it's gone away.
Another piece of memorabilia, actually a couple, a painting and a stick from Tim Horton. Yeah,
Tim is just, as you know, in Toronto, he's revered in Toronto, and I think just as much so here in Buffalo. So many people don't know the story of Tim Horton, and it really is sad because, here's a guy who was probably one of the greatest defensemen that's ever played in the league. I happen to have one of the portraits that was originally put in the first Tim Horton's location here in Western New York, and also one of his game sticks from the 1972-73 season. So that's the stick is actually one of my favorite pieces of memorabilia in my collection.
We're going to show next an early photo of the French Connection in the middle of this photograph. So I believe this is from 1973.
It is. It's the night they clinched the playoff berth, their first playoff berth, to play the Montreal Canadiens in 1973. This dates from April 1st, 1973. The Sabres had to win their last game of the season. They beat the Blues 3-1 behind the goaltending of Roger Crozier. And this photo is actually a kind of a rare shot because Van Miller was usually never at Sabre games. He was the voice of the NBA Buffalo Braves and the Bills of the National Football League. So he just happened to be at this game, and that's a picture of him with the French Connection. And I had all four of them sign the artwork. And it's sad that now three of the four are now not with us anymore.
And some more French Connection memorabilia, an oddly named piece of memorabilia. The jacket is cool looking, but they called it the Sabre Jack.
Yeah. I don't know how they came up with that, but it was a great name, and it was absolutely enormous. If you were a kid in the 1970s, you had to have a Sabre Jack. If you didn't have a Sabre Jack, you were not going to be one of the cool kids on the block. And this particular Sabre Jack was worn by Frank Christie, the team's longtime trainer, and he dates back all the way to the Bison years. So his sister-in-law donated that to me years ago after he passed away. So just happy and thrilled to have something of Frank Christie's.
One of the great years of Sabres history. They made the final, the Fog game, the series against the Flyers. And there's a photo here in the middle. It looks like something is going on in the stands. Do you know what the story is behind this photo?
I do, actually. That's Dave Schultz. And he's going up into the stands after a guy who had tossed a beer down at him in the penalty box. And, luckily for Dave Schultz, the cops and linesmen stopped him from getting up there because the guy that tossed the beer was Jimmy Ralston. Jimmy Ralston's one of the greatest prize fighters in Western New York history. And I think Dave Schultz would have had his hands full with Jimmy Ralston if he'd have got up to him.
What I like about the photo is the way all the players are just so peacefully look like they're just standing around,
Yeah.
They've become the spectators.
Yeah, I bet they were happy to have a minute off from fighting and watching, people in the stands doing it and not them. Save their knuckles.
And whose goalie mask is this?
That's a replica. I wish I had his original, but that's Jerry Desjardins replica. And unfortunately, that's the style he was wearing when he had a puck deflected into his eye and literally ended his career. But that's a nice replica, and he enjoyed seeing that when I met with Jerry.
Last photo to go through. This one celebrates an exhibition game between the Sabres and the Soviet Wings, which was just a wild affair. What do you remember about that?
I think the biggest thing I remember was how come nobody's playing goalie? I mean, both ends of the ice. I mean, the goaltending was just awful. More so for the Russians. But it just seemed like every puck that the Sabres threw at the net went in. And it was probably for the first 25 years of the existence of the team, the high point of Sabres hockey was that beating the Russians. At no time had the Russians ever been beaten in any team as bad as that. So kudos to the team from the 76 team to put a licking on that team, the Soviet Wings.
You have been so important to the history of Buffalo sports. What are the plans going forward, or at least what you hope will happen with your museum and all the memorabilia? Because it looks like that 1,000 square feet is about to give it up in terms of busting out.
Yeah, yeah, I can't find every time I get something new, I go, something's got to go down because I have no more room left. I would absolutely love to have this downtown somewhere in Buffalo, whether it is at the arena, whether it's at a hotel, whether it's anywhere else. I just want this to be shared with everyone in Western New York and Buffalo and beyond. I've tried to make that happen on YouTube. I've tried to make that happen with my book. But so many people come to my house and I quite simply can't show it to everybody. And I really wish I could. But yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to have a space downtown. Maybe one day that'll happen. That's my goal. We'll see if it happens. I'm doing everything I can.
John, continued success with the book and with your basement museum, and thank you so much for taking the time and sharing it with us. We very much appreciate it.
Glenn, anytime, you're always welcome. I love what you guys do, you and Paul and everybody. You guys do a fantastic job. You're always welcome. Come see us. Come visit us.
Will do. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, we're going to try Steve Menzie back. Hello, Steve. What's up?
Hello. My apologies for that. Can you hear me okay now?
Much better.
Good, good. Yeah.
You got audio, you got video, you're rocking everything.
I hope it's not just sizzle I have, though. Let's.
Okay. So because we didn't get the answers heard clearly, we're going to kind of start again. Expo is 4 days, the 11th through the 14th. Give us the 411.
Yeah, so it's at the same venue, the International Center in Toronto, by the airport on Airport Road. It is in a different hall. That was one of the COVID-related things that we were forced to do, is to change the actual hall that we're in. So that's presenting a fair number of challenges. Listen, and don't take any of this as a complaint, but it's been a lot of work to figure out a new floor plan. But I'm thrilled to be able to do it, and everyone is thrilled to be coming back. So we will be in hall number 1 in the conference center, which is at the northwest corner of the complex, as opposed to the southeast where the old hall was. And yeah, we have fairly regular hours. The Thursday night's been added. Friday is 10 to 8 p.m., Saturday 10 to 6 p.m., Sunday 10 to 5 p.m. And a similar structure in terms of guest interviews and similar corporate booths and so on there, as well as I say, I have over 250 dealers, which is actually up over where we were previously. So it'll be a lot of it, what everyone loves, and some additional new things as well.
A goal that you try to set is appealing both to collectors and to fans. Tell me about those two groups, and how do you try to meet or exceed the expectations of both of them?
Well, it's interesting. I approached that originally more from a business perspective, like how can I grow this business before I really understood the hobby. And the great thing is that that's been such a priority for so many key companies and people within the hobby that they have aligned very, very nicely. Companies in particular, Upper Deck and Ultra Pro, who I work with both very closely. That's very much what they look to do. And I do listen pretty well. I mean, and everyone used to say that we try and bring fans into collectors and groom fans to become collectors. And that's invariably what happens. But I also start to look at it, well, how can we get more people there? There are a lot of fans that haven't been exposed to the hobby. And again, the pandemic did a lot of that work for us in terms of reigniting that passion and interest from a lot of people that hadn't previously been part of the hobby before. So we have a lot of things that appeal in terms of everything from kids breaks to free admission for kids and those kinds of things, as well as I say, a lot of non-traditional hobbyists have dove into the hobby again deeply, whether it's from an investment perspective or from a passion perspective.
You have noted that, and this is a generalization, but compared to the Comic-Con audiences that you were used to, that some of the folks who are collectors can be, can we say, a bit grim?
Yeah, I'm laughing because fans in both worlds are passionate, and that passion tends to cut both ways at times. Uh, but one thing I always try to focus on, whether that's with with the team that I work with or what have you, that this is a passion, and we are enabling people's passions here. So, and we're not, and I don't say this lightly because I actually do a lot of charity work, but we're not curing cancer here. We are doing some really fun work that means a lot of things to people. So it's people can take it a little too seriously at times, and I'm trying again, I welcome all the complaints I'm getting right now. I shouldn't say I welcome them, but I know that they come from a passionate place. So we're good. I just can't wait to get the doors open next week and get everybody in there.
I know you could probably spend the next 2 hours answering this question, but what is, in a capsule, the process of working with dealers and with card companies and other hobby companies?
Well, again, I think in some ways, I now know what I don't know about collecting, and the way I started intentionally early on was just listening to people, whether that was dealers or the card companies or anybody else that has a great experience and interest in the hobby, and they all essentially want and value the same thing, and it's really just trying to help deliver that. I really focus more on providing, trying to provide better communication, trying to provide to smooth out the edges. I try to understand what the pain points are for each, but I think everyone has been extremely surprised by and pleased with the growth of the hobby and the resurgence of the hobby over the last 18 months. And I see it in every piece of what I'm doing now.
How have smartphones and selfies altered the business?
In a lot of ways. I mean, some of the most interesting developments of the hobby are some of the new apps. As a dealer, there isn't anybody that isn't. Everybody is so much better educated. Whether the easiest example of that would be pricing. eBay is now a click away for anybody to understand what comps are. So if you're out trying to sell or buy something, you had better have done your research, and if not, you have to assume that somebody will be doing it. The minute you quote a price, they'll be looking that up on eBay or on some of the other secondary market platforms and so on. So there's that. Knowledge is a good thing in other ways, in many ways. I wasn't able to take advantage of it enough this time. I have a new app or an app that was new pre-pandemic that I'm trying to get so that people can download, the floor plan and so on. That's still a work in progress. How else? Boy, that's what comes to mind right now. There are a lot of really exciting apps. I mean, people are breaking on their phones, so they're constantly in touch with the hobby. News travels very fast.
Talking about altering the business, and tell me if I have this wrong, but I believe Major League Baseball has decided when its current contract ends that they're taking their trading card business in-house. So how do you see other leagues doing in terms of following suit? And what does that all mean, in your opinion?
Well, again, the last 18 months was just a host of massive changes and reverberations through the hobby of different things happening, new records being set, new companies, new services, new platforms being launched. But the hobby world was shaken to its foundations a couple of months ago when the three leagues of the NBA, the MLB, and NFL all have signed long-term contracts with Fanatics. So a license that previously for baseball was held exclusively by Topps since 1951 is going to be moving over to Fanatics, and the company that they formed with the players associations of those three leagues. The NHL is the only league of the big four that has remained independent, and it's exclusive contract with Upper Deck. So obviously, there's a lot of changes that will come from that. who knows what those will be, but it's certainly not. There's no shortage of changes that have hit the hobby.
Okay, define for me, a newbie, a few terms. The first one is grading.
So grading would be, and this is I'm trying to keep it short. Grading is essentially authenticating, and the process of authenticating and appraising a card. And I mean, in its simplest form, that's what it is. It's in some ways I liken it to having a car appraised or a home appraisal done, but it's more complicated. One of the interesting phenomenons that has happened from eBay and so many things moving to online in this hobby is that there was a lot of fraudulent activity happening on eBay early on, and so grading became more important because if you're just buying a raw card that isn't serialized or in any way identifiable, somebody might sell you this card, and that's the one you think you're buying, and you might receive another one. So grading, as an example, took the place of a lot of that. That would authenticate a card. You had have reputable companies that determine its authentication, or its authenticity rather, and then assign it a numerical grade that speaks to its value relative to others, and it tracks population reports and that sort of thing. So that phenomenon has increased dramatically. More and more people have been grading the cards because of the value that it adds. But it's also, again, that part of the hobby has changed dramatically in the last 2 years.
Well, I have a rare card I want to show you, and if you have some idea of what the value of this one is, I think it's pretty rare. I don't know too many people that have a Paul Patsku Upper Deck Maple Leaf card.
Yeah.
Would you say a small or a large fortune?
Well, the only word I can think of right now is priceless. I mean, the centering, the corners are obviously outstanding, but the rarity is what that speaks to me. Is that is a true piece of art.
Yeah, I don't think I would sell mine at any price. I think you're right.
Good, because probably nobody would buy it at any price. But sorry, Paul.
Speaking of authentication, now I found a card on your site, on your very website, that I want to show you, and you have some explaining to do, because I do not think, now I'm not an expert, I could be wrong, but I don't think that Honus Wagner, the most expensive hockey or baseball card rather in history, I don't think there's any record of him ever wearing aviator sunglasses. So what do you have to say for yourself?
Well, a lot of people think that the Babe was the only guy that went hard off the playing field, but Honus had a little known side to him where he liked to head to Hawaii and chill in the off season. But this is one of the neat Project 70 cards as part of and this is an element that Topps has really done exceptionally well with, is bringing a lot of artist interpretations to cards. And actually the artist who came up with this card, a guy by the name of Ski, or goes by DJ Ski, will be at our Expo as well. And he's actually got a new drop, as all the cool kids call them now, coming out at our show. So that's one of the neat things that people will be seeing as well. But
I want to talk about some of the athletes who are going to be at the show. And this one I got a kick out of, because tell everybody who this guy is.
Well, probably on this show, I don't need to tell anyone that, but that is Toronto's own David Ayers, who rocketed to fame when he was called on to fill in the net, and handily turned away all the Leaf shooters that night. But he's had a wonderful and very long 15 minutes of fame from this, and he'll be at the show. He'll be doing an onstage Q&A. I've been told that he's they're working on Disney is working on a movie on his story. So that's another piece that no doubt he'll address in the onstage Q&A. But that's one of the things that I'm very proud of, that we've added into the Sport Card Expo, and it's something that I learned from the Comic-Con world, are the Q&As on stage that we do. And one of the things that I noticed was that there really wasn't a lot of non-transactional based things for people to do there. And people are just fascinated by stories, and they want to hear and learn things that they don't know, or they no other way to find. And I recall the very first Q&A that I had at the show was none other than Bobby Hull. And Bobby's a special place in my heart because he was my dad's favorite player. And the stories he told of early days and the train travel to games and all that, and were just fascinating. And anybody that knows Bobby knows how passionate he is, and how he gives probably the best fan experience you can ever hope to have. So he'll be there, and as usual, he'll stick around until the last fan has been gotten his autograph or been able to share a story. So that's I'm very happy to have those on as part of the expo, and they'll be continuing, as well as we're adding in more hobby guests, people that may not be players, but they still have very interesting roles. A lot of people talking about grading, or the basics of collecting, investing in sports cards. Jeff Wilson, the sports card investor, will be there. So a lot of that is additional content for people to enjoy at the show.
Another player who will be signing is Peter Eng. Now, what's interesting to me about this card is I did not realize that the witness protection program actually fielded a hockey team. So Peter, apparently, will he be going incognito at the show too?
I can't speak to that, but yeah, we had some explaining to do around that card. But it's I've seen articles. You quoted Puck Junk earlier, and Sal Berry, the enigma that runs Puck Junk, has done some great articles for us of some of the unique cards and the mistakes that have been made on cards over the time, and that probably has a place in that space. But yeah, Peter will be joining us. We have quite a number of goalies, from Billy Smith and Andy Moog and Curtis Joseph, as well as David Ayers, who will be joining us, and then some of the other greats like Daryl Sittler, Tiger Williams, Marian Hossa, of course. So yeah, it's a great list, and of course, Mr. Hasek, especially for our Buffalo fans that are on tonight, will be there. So it's a great list, and also Kim St. Pierre. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Kim. And I met Kim through one of the virtual expos we did during COVID, and she's an outstanding person. Her energy is just phenomenal, and she's a great storyteller and very passionate about the game and all things around it. So
yeah, I'm very happy that you are including members of the women's game to talk and interact with the fans as well.
Well, yeah, and that's one of those things that you spoke of in terms of fans and collectors, and how we broaden the audience. And it's just they play every bit as hard, and they're every bit as talented. One of the stories that Kim told at our virtual expo was about how when she got the call to come and practice with the Canadians. So it changes as many women's lives as it does men's. So I think that's I think I share a lot of people's enthusiasm for that.
And Danielle Goyette is another woman's player who will be at the show.
We have a full roster, and while we're heavily hockey this time, it's not just hockey. We have another fellow Canadian, Brad Hitman Hart, who will be joining us, and very popular in every country. And he'll be there on Saturday. We have Jesse Barfield, World Series fame, who'll be with us on Sunday. So it's a great roster.
Which leads me into the last series of questions I have for you, Steve. And I appreciate so close to the show you spending so much of your time with us. Working with athletes, are there any interaction moments that make you smile from past shows, either interactions with yourself or interactions between an athlete and someone getting an autograph or a photo? What makes you smile? What are some of the special moments you remember?
There's some that are funny. There's some that are touching. There are some that are on the other side of the blade of the passion piece. But I do recall at the last show we had in 2019, I I don't know if any of you know Brian Gray of the hobby, Brian Gray of Leaf Cards. He's an enigma in his own right, but he was parading around in the back of the show, the green room in one of Ric Flair's robes, his wrestling robes, and that was a sight to behold. Rick had an interesting expression on his face when he saw it. And Brian's not a petite man, so it was especially interesting. It's just the great thing. A lot of these guys have done this a lot of times, and I think it probably becomes a little tiring, and I can experience that. But it truly seems almost to the last player that once players get in front of fans, they really do enjoy and appreciate the passion that fans have. I think they all respect and appreciate the how much their careers have meant to people. So they do show that. I'm trying to get more of these players to engage through these Q&As and that kind of stuff, because I think it is important. But I'd say on balance, that's probably the biggest thing, is how much they do enjoy it. I think these guys, and I don't know many of the women players as well, but they really seem to enjoy talking about the game. And there's some very colorful players and stories as well, as from the people you would expect from, the Ronix of the world. From on the wrestling side, I've worked with Hulk Hogan before, Ric Flair. I back on the Fan Expo show back in 2013, I put together the arm wrestling match between our previous mayor Rob Ford and Hulk Hogan. So I've had sit down conversations with Alice Cooper and Gordie Howe, talking about golf, and they're really humans, but with some very interesting stories to share.
And as humans, and I won't ask you to name names, but lastly, spill the tea, as the kids like to say. Don't name any names, but you must have had some athletes that were quite a headache, or a pain in the lower extremities, or diva behavior. So without letting us know who it was, which story was that? Like, I hope he doesn't come next year.
Well, nothing stands out and comes to mind. The one I'm thinking of right now is I hated Billy Smith as a kid watching hockey, and I don't know. It might be all I can do to not whack him across the back of the legs when he walks by to go on stage. But I got some energy still held in me around that, so I may at least have to bring it up with him. But it can be difficult. But again, I truly come down to think most of these guys are really they're good folks. They like what they do, and we all get a little cranky at times. But I think if you think of kids and fans, that most people are pretty good. So I like that. I'll try and end with a bit of a positivity note on that one.
Well, brother, what are you gonna do when the Sports Card Expo comes for you, brother?
That's right. You're going to come for it. It's going to be a great show, and we look forward to having all the participants and hosts of this great show, Hockey Time Machine, there, and to see what kind of trouble we can all get into together.
Well, what I wish for you, two things, and we will look forward to seeing you next week, is one, that you have a successful show, having people live and interacting again, which is great. And number two, that once the show is over, you get some sleep.
Yeah, I definitely need that. But listen, after sitting on the bench for the last almost 2 years, I'm never going to complain about having to work 20 hours a day. So I'll look forward to seeing you guys.
Oh,
and
go
lots
ahead.
of others. Yeah, well, maybe a little bit.
Steve, thank you so much for your time. We're all looking forward to it. We'll see you next week, and continued success.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
Okay, Steve. Bye-bye. Okay, next up. Who the hell knows? Oh, yes, that's right. It's our buddy Mike Wilson, who's an occasional host of this very show. Mike Wilson is. Each week, Mike hosts a podcast and YouTube show with Leafs great Rick Vaive titled Squid and the ultimate Leafs fan. And I have something here that Mike has also done. During the 2018-2019 season, Wilson went to all 89 Leafs games, home and away, and wrote about it in his book, The Ultimate Road Trip. Mike, thanks very much for joining us. And tell us first, how did you get the name The Ultimate Leafs Fan? Uh-oh, somebody is muted.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
How about that? Modern technology. Well, first off, thanks for having me. That's what I did say unless you can read my lips. And secondly, ESPN gave me that name. They called and wanted to do a story on fans, and they were doing it through all different sports. And when they sent a photographer from Buffalo who came up and took hundreds and hundreds of pictures. They used one, and they labeled me the Ultimate Leafs Fan. And we at the time were starting to take the brand out there to do some charity work and stuff with our room, and just decided to use that name.
Your amazing man cave of memorabilia is now mostly a memory, right? Where did it go?
Well, it's in the Museum of History in Ottawa. We were approached by numerous people. So I'm 67 now, so the succession plan was in place a number of years ago while I was still working. I've been retired for 5 years. We were looking at a number of different corporations approached us trying to make beliefs. I would suggest if we were in the process with the Leafs going down the road to them having a possible museum inside ACC at the time. We talked to the Hockey Hall of Fame, but of course, there's no guarantee it would be on permanent display. And the museum, we were part of an exhibit with the Museum of History in Ottawa for 100 years for the NHL, and they used 50 pieces from the exhibit or our place in the exhibit, and they approached about taking it and making it a permanent place in the museum at some point. And, after discussing with Deb, we went through it, and I realized that the Hockey Hall of Fame, while does an awesome job on hockey internationally and covers all aspects of hockey, I wanted to specifically Leafs based, but more importantly, I look at the Museum of History in Ottawa as our Smithsonian, as our national museum. And I thought by being there, it would encourage other people to do the same and build off the base from there. And I did talk to the Hockey Hall of Fame on numerous occasions. Obviously, they weren't happy we didn't go there, but they could never guarantee that the items would be displayed. And that's one of the knocks on the hall, that things do get placed in the archives and I never see the light of day again. I didn't want that to happen with this collection that I've spent a lifetime collecting.
The wonderful, wonderful pictures of your collection do remain. So let's take a pictorial stroll down memory lane and look at some of the items you collected.
Yeah.
But I have to start with this one. Now, I'm guessing that you're belting out, "I did it my way."
No, no, not quite. What we did was we were approached to do something on a charity basis. I mean, people have to understand, when I first had this, I never really thought that it would get to the stage where I'd be talking to people about it even today. I thought I would just have a room where I would throw stuffs up on hooks and nails and hangers and throw some TVs up and have a bar with cold beer, and my buddies come over and watch sporting events. And I eventually wanted to have my own room designed my own way. We did that. Somebody came over and suggested we should do something for charity. And one thing just led to another. Maple Leafs organization, Maple Leafs TV, actually heard about us, and they came and looked at it, wanted to do a one-part special, ended up doing a two-part special on the Leafs TV. And with social media, it got out there, and the next thing we started getting approached. So we sat down and we made the decision to get involved in charities. And the stipulation we made, so we wouldn't say no to everybody, we didn't have to say yes to everybody, was that there had to be a Maple Leaf involved with every event that we hosted. And we did that. And I don't know how many we hosted over the year, probably 50 or 60, I would say, over the years, with events and charities and so on, probably closer to 100. But we raised over $2 million at our home, which we're very proud of. Led to hundreds of thousands of dollars being raised otherwise. And every dime that we raised went right to the charity. And Deb and I are very proud of that. And we got a lot of support from the hockey community, which is the best in all professional sports, are hockey players. And of course, from all our family, friends, business associates who supported us. we basically just opened our door I opened the door to the front of the house and let people in and just got to talk about the collection, and all the work was done by everybody else. So over the years, I got way too much credit for what we did, but we're very proud of being a small part of that in launching a number of charitable foundations like Michael Landsberg and Mike Babcock's Sick Not Weak an endeavor, which for mental illness and depression. We help 2 young children get Operation St. Louis that allowed them to walk, who had cerebral palsy, and that raised over $1 million by the time it was all said and done. Away from us, a gentleman stepped up and offered $500,000 after seeing the story in the media, and we got a lot of media exposure. So TSN Sports, all these guys really stepped up and helped us. CTV, the guys in Q107, we help with abuse awareness. I mean, it's just endless amounts of charities we got involved with, and we're so proud and we're so happy for the support we got from everybody. And that's the one thing we do miss, is that we've had to kind of stop doing all that.
Well, in this one instance, I will disagree with you. The praise for using your inventory for such good causes, the praise is well deserved. So,
well, thank you, Glenn. Yes,
you deserve it. Now, I want to ask you, from how many different places and how many different ways did you go about acquiring all of this, and how many years did it take?
I just went through this with somebody today. I was doing an interview. It started when I was like any kid growing up. I was very young. Like Paul Pascal would go in his first game in '59. I went a year later, I believe. And just like anybody, I fell in love with the game of hockey first and foremost. And then I started collecting. Then it became the next progression was to watch hockey on Saturday night after playing the game myself, out on the street, schoolyard, in the basement, anywhere I could get my hands on a stick and play. And my first real piece of memorabilia was a Carl Brewer game used stick. He was very close friends with a cousin of my dad's, and he got that for me, and I treasured that piece. And the second piece I got was the Frank Mahovlich poster, the Libby's Beans poster, that we couldn't get because my mom shopped at Loblaws, and it was a Dominion store, and there it is there. It was a Dominion store presentation. And my dad got 2 copies. I'd never had a color poster before. My uncle got it and gave it to my dad. I went out and got it. And Frank Mahovich's father used to be a skate sharpener at Leaside Arena. And my dad worked at IBM, and he played there every Sunday morning. So he handed me the 2 posters, and he said, "Wouldn't it be nice if we gave Mr. Mahovlich one of these posters?" And I said, of course, no, because I wanted them both. But the plan was to give Mr. Mahovlich one. So we went to Leaside Arena. He was a big man. He came walking up with his overalls, and he knew who I was because I hung around his booth every Sunday morning for a couple of hours. And I handed him the poster. He patted me in the head, and he hung that in his booth. And it stayed there until the day he retired. And Frank, in that picture you saw, when I was telling him that story, he said, "We do have pictures of our family and our family albums." And my dad had that post in the background. And Frank was actually welling up when I was telling him the story about his dad, and was bringing back all those memories. And Frank's son, Ted, I told him the same story, and he jumped right on that and said too, yes, that poster was in the background. So to me, that's sort of the full circle for memorabilia and collecting. And that this is there I was a young kid, and here I am telling Frank Mahovlich that story for that very poster I got as a child.
Originally, when I saw this photo, I thought, well, maybe he'd been imprisoned. Free Frank Mahovlich. I thought maybe you were.
Exactly. Well, a lot of teams would go on in prison when they played him.
But that must be a secondary to the charity and all the benefits that have accrued from that. Actually getting to see the players enjoy some of the stuff that maybe they didn't have time to really take in during their playing days. That must be rewarding for you too.
Well, I mean, there's 2 parts of that story. One is everybody has to remember these guys were kids too. They all had their heroes. They all collected hockey cards. We had Tiger Williams on our, by the way, just a little self-motion here. If you got to listen to one podcast, listen to the 2-parter on Tiger Williams. He was collecting hockey cards as a kid. All these guys collected sticks. They had their heroes. They scored the game-winning goal pretending there was somebody from their era. So it's only a natural progression for them to step up and have a look at this stuff and appreciate it as well. And the second part of that is that a lot of my friends that I knew that played national hockey, they'd always be giving me sticks, gloves, and all that kind of stuff. And they didn't want to keep any of it because they didn't mean anything at the time. Well, over the years, I've given most of it all back, none of the Leaf stuff, mostly given all that stuff back to them because they all have children now and they want to pass it on. So that part is very rewarding. And then, the part that there's a little bit of a story here that I'll tell you. you know, what you really appreciate and what I like about collecting is that the only thing that matters to me is the story. The rest of it doesn't mean anything. It's the story that enhances the value of the artifact for me. And by the value, I mean what I learned from it, what I can pass on to Leaf Nation and to other collectors. Because I consider myself not a collector, but more a preserver of history and the gatekeeper of some of the pieces I have that I like to share. And one example is we had a Team Canada 1978 junior sweater with the blue crest, and it was Rick Vibes, and I had it turned over on a chair. And above that was a Wayne Gretzky pitcher breaking the Gordie Howe scoring record. It was a Leroy Neiman serialgraph. So when Wayne Gretzky came to visit the room for one of our charity events, he came down and I said, that sweater must bring back some memories. And he thought it was his sweater. And he says, well, no, I got a better story for you on the poster above. And I said, oh, what is that? And he said, well, when that event happened, one of the greatest sporting events in history of sports, he said that Leroy Neiman used to come to a lot of their games. And so he befriended a lot of the players. So when that happened, he went up to Luc Robitaille and they were talking. He said, listen, Luc, would you like me to do something to commemorate the evening and this great feat by Wayne? And Lucky said, absolutely, that'd be fantastic, Leroy, please. So I'll leave it with me. I'll be back to you. So off he goes, and about 6 months later, he comes and they have a big dinner, and he makes the presentation to Wayne of that seriograph, the original painting, presents it to Wayne, and each player gets their own copy. And the Leroy turned around and handed everybody a bill. And Wayne couldn't stop laughing, telling that story. And so if you look that up, it'll say the LA Kings commissioned Leroy Neiman to do that piece. Leroy just suckered them. So fast forward a few years, and Eric Bloom, who is the sculptor who did Legends Row for the Maple Leafs, he was over visiting. And I was telling that story to a group, and he had a group of Maple Leaf people over. And he said, I can one-up that one for you or go along with that. He did the same thing to Muhammad Ali. I know Leroy. And Leroy was famous for doing that. When Muhammad Ali got back from Zaire, he said, do you want me to do something to commemorate that event? And Muhammad said, why are you asking me, Leroy? And he goes, well, no. You want me to do something? Nah. And he wouldn't fall for it because he knew what was going to happen. He says, you don't have to ask my permission to do a painting. And he knew he was going to get sucked in and handed a bill. So there you are, the progression of one simple little piece that I picked up in Las Vegas at an art store. And I thought it was the other, that I didn't know this one existed. And it just blossomed with all the tentacles of each story to where I've just told you that. And there's been additionals onto that, but I think you get the idea.
Well, speaking of you and Wayne Gretzky and artwork, let me show you this one. This is you and 99 and Andy Warhol.
Yes.
What's that?
Well, that's one of the stereographs, and I always wanted that, and I wanted the Leroy Neiman one too. And the Andy Warhol one, the funny part about that story is that there's a hockey stick in it. When Wayne went to the studio to do the posing for, to do when he was doing some sketches, they didn't have a hockey stick, so they had to run across the street to a sporting goods store and get one. And the guy didn't believe him that it was Wayne Gretzky who was trying to get the stick, and was for Andy Warhol. So that is a famous picture, and that serigraph and that's an early version of it. And that one was signed by Andy Warhol and by Gretzky, and it was an early signature. So that was a real fame piece, and I loved it in the museum. Unfortunately, the museum took it, but it's there. But it'll be in good possession, that's for sure.
So, Mike, who had the biggest Wayne Gretzky memorabilia collection? Wayne, the Hockey Hall of Fame, or you?
No, not me. I'm not even close. There's lots of guys that have tons of stuff. His dad went the story in the restaurant. Tom Bidoff told me when they started the Wayne Gretzky restaurant, they went to Wayne and said, do you have any items, sticks, or those skates are got a great, those are the skates from the 51 game point streak. And I got those by fluke. Anyway, he went to him and said, do you have any memorabilia we can hang up in a restaurant? And he goes, I don't really have anything. My dad may have some stuff. So go see my dad. And my dad takes sticks here and there. So they go to the little place in Brampton, and there's, as Tom told me, you see your room here. This room was filled with stuff, and another room about the same size again with as much stuff. So they had to delay opening the restaurant for over a month while they went through everything and insured it and documented it all and put it throughout the place. And Walter been accumulating this stuff for years and years and years.
Wow. Let me go back to the sweaters. Are there any among those that have a particularly good story? I'm sure they all have a story, but is there any that comes to mind that you like to reflect on?
Yeah, well, the George Armstrong sweater, from 63, and when he's captain, okay, that sweater, and you can't see it, it's probably right, if you can't see my fingers, right in the left-hand corner, that sweater. So when I was all of 8, 9 years old, I got it. We went for and the young guys, Paul Pascal, I probably remember, and the guys our age, well, I remember when he used to get tours of the gardens. So we got a tour of the gardens, and my dad took me, and I didn't care. They were going through, and they were showing you where these guys were in this Frank Sinatra and all this kind of stuff. All I wanted to see was the Leaf dressing room. So we got to the room, we go through the door, go in, and the first thing I saw, now Dave Keon was my favorite player, and Frank was my second favorite, but all I saw was George Armstrong's sweater. And I buzzed right to it. For some reason, I was thinking they're going to throw us out of here. This can't be real. We're going to be left in the room where the Maple Leafs get dressed. And I went right to the sweater, and I went to go touch it. And they said, well, you're not supposed to touch it. The usher said, it's made of silk, which it wasn't. But he let me touch it. And I left. And here I am, 40 years later, I bought that sweater. And the other part of the story is, the door that I went through, and I used to stand outside behind the ropes when they had the ropes and both teams dressed in that side of the rink. That door used to slam open, and then Johnny Bauer would walk out. And I remember that door, always staring at it as a kid and just waiting for the boys to come out. And the door would slam open. And little did I know, 50 years later, that door would be in my basement, that exact door and that sweater. So the sweater and the door have real special meanings to me.
And among the items, a turnstile. But this is not just any turnstile. What's the story here?
Well, I bought that in the auction, and that was a double turnstile, and it actually had the bars that you went in through, and it has the ticket. You can't see that there, but in the bottom I have 2 of them, and on the other one is the ticket box where you drop the tickets. And the significance is, my father and I when we'd go down, he'd take me to a game, we would stand under the clock and watch the other players from the other team come in. And they would walk right in through the front doors before they go into the warm-up. We'd be there at 6 o'clock, and the game was at 8, and they'd go in and get dressed and go on for the warm-up, usually about a half an hour before the game started. And I remember I got my dad handed me a pen and a paper the first time I was standing there. And I said, what's this for? And he goes, we'll get the guys to go sign autographs. And I go, what's that? Little do you know what he was starting. And the first autograph I got was Kenny Warm. And he pointed him out to me, and he had his trench coat and went up, and he waited for me to ask, very polite, and then he gave me the autograph. And the adults stepped out of the way and let me get the autograph. And not like today, they'd be banging me and throwing me aside and stepping on me. But the next guy that comes through, there's this big buzz through the crowd, and you could see, and I recognized who it was, and he came through, it was Bobby Hull. So I went up to him with the book and the pen, and he stood down and he waited for me to speak. And here I am, here I am 67. This is almost close to 60 years later. And he looked down at me and he goes, hi, do you play hockey? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, who's your favorite team? And I said, Toronto Maple Leafs. And he started laughing, and everybody in the crowd started laughing, but he was talking to me, and the whole crowd was engaged in this. So he signs the book, and he waits for me to thank him, and he patted me on the head and said, you're welcome. And then somebody said from the crowd, hey, Bobby, you're going to get 3 tonight. And Bobby yelled back to the crowd, the name's Simpson, not Samson. So that's always stuck with me. So that little sidebar story is there. But what the key thing was that everybody for standing room would stay outside their turnstiles. And when the gates would open, it would be a race to the top step to get the standing room. So my dad told me. So I'd always watch that front door for when we could go in, because I was always afraid we were going to miss the game if we didn't get in there in time. Meanwhile, it was only 6:30 or whatever it was. And going through those turnstiles as a kid. So that was the significance of those turnstiles and why I had to have them coming out of that auction.
As you've already mentioned, your man cave wasn't just a magnet for items, but also for NHL greats. So I want to go through a few of those photos before we let you go. So who's this handsome young man?
Well, that's my pal Squid. That's Ricky Vive, and he was a frequent visitor to the room, and he helped us with our charity. Stevie Ludzik and him would be, they just exemplify what NHL guys are, and these guys would just step up anytime to help us with any of our events with no questions asked and nothing. And these guys would drive in from Niagara Falls. And, you get somebody, you mentioned Wayne Gretzky. Well, Wayne Gretzky not only came to our event, he actually donated $10,000 to our charity, bought 4 tickets. He's the draw and he buys 4 tickets. And then he auctioned off a golf match between him and Dustin Johnson, which a guy paid $25,000 for. And some guy would have paid more, but Wayne stopped it at that. Bobby Orr, he couldn't have been nicer. Berkey was one of the greatest guys also helping. He called our room. He gave it the most best compliment I think I ever had. He said it was for Leaf fans, it's like the Vatican. So I took that as real honor coming from Burke. But we had over 80 Maple Leafs visit the room. We've had rock stars, billionaires, artists, you name it, all go through the place. And everybody, it's funny how they walk down those 14 steps. And yes, it's a coincidence. There was 14 steps and Dave Cam was number 14. That was a coincidence, but I will tell you it wasn't, if you want to hear if you want to make it a better story. But every guy, when it got to that bottom step, and I don't care who they were, their childhood came back and they would listen to me ramble on, as you can hear me rambling on today on Story, folks. I do get excited when I get talking about this stuff. And once they let me stop for 10 minutes, they would go on for 20 minutes themselves, telling me all their childhood stories. And there wasn't one person ever who stepped down there who didn't do that. Even Tom Hicks, who was a country and Western singer from Nashville, came down and he just couldn't stop going on. Alan Frew, all these type of guys, the stories just were endless. And that was one of the treats that I got out of having the room and having this shared with me, which I then shared with everybody else.
I was so pleased that you mentioned Johnny Bauer, because we have a photo of you with the Leafs great goaltender. And here's another example of someone that you kind of idolized when you were growing up and you watched play, who you never imagined that you and he would be shoulder to shoulder.
Absolutely. And the best part of that whole story is the banner. So I get emails every week, every day from people telling me stories, trying to sell me things, asking me advice, just on and on. And I got this email from this one particular chap who was a little bit critical that I was calling myself the Ultimate Leafs fan, and he was a big collector and he had a bunch of stuff. And I was saying I didn't really call myself that. I was given that name and I'm just using it. I don't for 1 minute think that I'm the ultimate anything. I just like to talk about memorabilia and so on. So he kind of cooled off a little bit and he came back to me, and the long and short of it is he said he had some items and he was thinking of selling some things. Would I be interested? And so I asked him what, and he said he had the banner. And I thought, well, the banners are all gone. And the only banner you would have is one of the banners that Cliff Fletcher put up in the late 90s to honor the Leafs in the past. And he said, well, no, actually, my father, his name was Wayne Parsons, but his father's name was Norm Parsons. He was the upholsterer at the Gardens for 40 years. And he came to work one day in the summer during the maintenance period and went to go check on the workers. And he went over and there was a big crowd of guys standing around. And all the banners, he noticed all the Stanley Cup banners were on the ground and over the seats, and they're all torn and ripped. They're being used as paint tarps and for work. And he was very upset. So he goes back to his room on the 3rd floor to his shop, and the 62 banner is still on one of the pallets. They didn't take that one. So he went and hid it in the back cupboard and left it there. When Ballard came to the room months later, he asked him, could I take this home? And Ballard didn't care. So he took it home and he gave it to his son and he put it in the box. And his son had taken it to an event a few years ago, like around 2014, and it was a big hit. And he decided he wanted to move on. So he approached the Leafs, approached the Hall of Fame, talked a couple auction houses, but he came to me. And the thing about me that he liked is the fact that my biggest thing, and I'm not bragging here, but all I wanted to say was the one thing that I've promised anybody is I do not own these pieces. All they are is in my possession, and all I'm doing is passing a legacy on of the people who owned it before I did and passing that story on. And I'll preserve the history of your father's legacy through this piece. You just give me the honor to do that. I know it sounds corny, but I really do believe that, folks. So we did that, and we took it, and we got a lot of press for him on it. And Wayne, his father, passed away. He was 90. He had a million stories to tell, which was great. Never got a chance to meet him. Paul and I were going to go and visit him in Stratford. So anyway, but as it turns out, he lived around the corner from me in Scarborough, and there's a whole Tim Horton story I could tell that goes with that, and how Tim Horton started with the donuts from one of his buddies, but that's for another day. But the Johnny Bauer part of the story is we have the banner and we wanted to share it. And the thing about it is, no matter how we asked all kinds of people at the Gardens why they came out of the roof. And probably the most logical is Ballard didn't want to keep looking at these and be reminded about the winning teams when his teams weren't winning. So anyway, regardless of that, we have the banner. It's the 62 banner. And when Johnny Bauer came over, him and his wife, Nancy, they were looking at the banner, and he was there and the tears were flowing down his face looking at it. And Deb and I, and even Paul Pascal talked after, and the thing was, that was his first cup, and that was to him so important because it wasn't in the rafters. He probably hadn't got a chance to admire it and see it ever, and here he is holding this banner, and so it was so emotional for him. And we all got caught up in it too, because he didn't realize what it meant. And and all these type of things, I noticed when these Maple Leafs would come in the room, the emotion that they would experience, looking at the door, looking at the stick rack, looking at some of the things from the gardens, the turnstiles, and this banner, what it meant to those guys, because they won it and they were part of it. So that was very, very, very important. And that made me feel really good. And I still have the banner. I'm looking at it right here across the room. And the part about the banner, though, I tell everybody, and I made this part up, but here you go. 1962, everybody knows Bill Barocco, 1951. They didn't win again until 62. His body was found that year, but here's the story. Of all the banners that were there, why was the 62 one left on the pallet? To live on forever. The Barocco ghost lives on.
You are so deep.
I knew you'd get that. Not bad for a guy from Scarborough, Ontario, about a grade 3 education.
Well, I mean, other than the last 15 seconds, though, that was really a tremendous story. So thank you for lightening it up a little.
Exactly.
There at the end. So one last photo of all the power panels that you've had, all the major groups you've had. Is there any higher wattage group than these three individuals? What's going on here?
Well, you see the two stiffs on the right. The one regret I have is those two didn't play for the Leafs. And I told them that, actually. I went to Bobby's Box. They invited me when we had an event for Derek Sanderson. And I said, the one thing I have is these two guys, these two stiffs beside me here, you didn't play for Leafs. That's the only thing going wrong with you two guys. And the guy on the left, well, what can you say? Legend.
He's wearing a Bobby Orr.
Well, I'll forgive him for that because he wanted Bobby to sign a couple of things. So I guess he was being nice to him. But he's not forgiven for wearing the Bruins sweater. I can tell you that.
All right, right to left, Derek Sanderson, Bobby Orr, and Paul Patskou. So
yes. And
as for you, Mike Wilson, now we can say you're also the ultimate guest.
Ultimate guest? Oh my goodness! How about that? That's pretty high praise for some of the guys you've had on here.
Yeah, I know.
So the $100 will be in the mail to you tomorrow morning.
Mike, we can't thank you enough for your time, and we're looking forward to seeing you in person.
Yes, absolutely. And next week, I can't wait for you guys.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, bye-bye. Now, last but certainly not least, and Jim Mcrae, thank you very much for your patience.
You're welcome, Glenn. What's cracking?
Well, I see what you did there.
You're welcome.
I'm from Seattle. You know, the last guest, Mike, his show is Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan. I should have said, well, I'm not Squid, but I am a Kraken. So,
very good.
All right. So before we get into the conversation with you, you sent us a video. And I want to mention that Griffintown Media, that Jim is the head of, is a creative agency out of Montreal. And they provide everything from graphic design, publishing, photography, video, and more. And as you'll learn, Griffintown has a strong hockey connection. But I just mentioned the and more. So before we talk to Jim, here's a short video he provided that describes the and more.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jim. I'm president of Griffintown Media in Montreal. We publish books, magazines, printed documents on lots of subjects. We also come up with some pretty fresh and fun ideas, and one of our most recent ones is really interesting. It's an app. It's called LivePrint. LivePrint allows your smartphone to link to static objects or images and photos, for example, in your document, and it links them to videos, which enhances your message directly on your phone. The outcome is very specific and enriched information delivered to your audience through your phone. Using our book, The Greatest Collection, which features artifacts from the Hockey Hall of Fame, I simply grab my smartphone, open the LivePrint app, point the phone at pre-selected images in the book and watch video associated with those images. Let's take a look. We have about a dozen videos related to the book ready for streaming with plans to add more soon. We can add new content even to this published and bound document through an easy-to-use control panel. If you're interested, the app is available for your phones on the app stores, and you can order a copy of our book through the link below. Beyond photos, the app can be used to enhance ads in magazines or illustrations in training and technical manuals. The possibilities are almost endless. If you would like to discuss how to enhance your products or services in a dynamic and engaging way, contact us to discuss how we can make your content come alive through LivePrint. We'll talk soon.
Oh, we will talk soon, sooner than you ever imagined. So, Jim, this is what Jerry Seinfeld had to say about books. Quote, "What is this obsession people have with books? They put them in their houses like they're trophies. What do you need it for after you read it?" Well, I guess Jerry hadn't heard about your app.
That's a great comment from Jerry. I remember, who was it? Groucho said a book is your man's best friend. I think that's how it went, Glenn. I forget the punchline, so I'm ruining the joke. But what Jerry was talking about is exactly what we had in mind when we created the app. Basically, I sit here sometimes looking at the bookshelf and deciding that the books that we produce sometimes are bound and put on a shelf. And I got frustrated in thinking about that because so much time goes into producing the books that I wondered what could be done to make them not static and sitting on the shelf forevermore. So I thought of this app. I came up with this idea for this app. Essentially, what it does, it makes the book always alive. So I came up with the idea for LivePrint, the name. So anything that's bound in that book, or any book behind me, or the one that we saw in the video, any information could be amplified or complemented with the app, because we could keep adding content, as it were, through the app related to the content in the book, not duplicating the content because that would be boring. So just sort of complementing the content, and in this case through video and on your smartphone. And the idea there is that it actually attracts a younger audience, perhaps too, because as we know, a lot of young people, like my kids and so on, that they have their phones with them all the time. So the smartphone has become like almost an accessory for the era, probably more so for certain ages. But the app itself can be used for entertainment, like for the hockey books, but it could also be used for educational purposes. And we're also doing that with some clients, including school boards, where you could take textbook material and sort of relate lesson plans from textbooks and create videos that support the lesson plan, just to help get the message across and to make perhaps the content even that much more interesting for, in this case, the students. So that's the whole reason. So I'm with Jerry Seinfeld on that. It's once they're read, they could be put on the shelf and never used again. But in this case, there's no reason for that, because you could keep updating your knowledge by going back to the book, because there's always going to be new information added to the book. You know what I mean?
So what are the next steps? Where are you in the process? And do you have any type of timeline for when this might be in circulation?
Yeah, so in the video, we shot the video probably in the late summer. So I was anticipating that the app would already be ready in the marketplace. We're almost there. We're at the final testing stages right now. So the app is going to be on the app stores probably within about 2 weeks or 10 days. So it's going to be available, and we'll announce it on social media, and anyone could download it really for free. Probably mid-December, let's say, or early December. And the idea would be to help promote, to put it out this year would be to promote the app, but we want to promote the hockey books too, because the app is related to, in this case, the Greatest Collection, but we also have other books in that series that we've done with the Hall of Fame, the National Treasure series. So we want to include also other videos and content from the other books in the app. But the moment the app's available and tested and fully accepted on the Apple App Store and on the Google Play Store. We'll make it known to everyone. We'll announce it through social media, and everyone can download it for free.
You mentioned the National Treasure series, and can you briefly go back, tell me the backstory of Griffintown's connection to the Hockey Hall of Fame and putting together this marvelous 3-volume set?
Yeah, it started with an idea from Craig Campbell at the Hall. So Craig, for people watching who know, or those who are now about to learn, Craig curates their photo collection at the Hall, and I guess the photo collection under his supervision is probably the largest photo collection in the world for hockey. So Craig met me one day and for another project, and he mentioned his idea of creating a book that featured really just photos, small amount of text, but photos like almost like you would see in a museum. So we work with Craig in the Hall and Phil Pritchard, and we selected, in the case of that particular book, 100 photos to help celebrate the 100th anniversary of the NHL in the first edition of the book. So that would feature the photos. Then we approached it. The second book is called The Hall, and it celebrated the Hall's anniversary a couple of years ago. And for that book, we worked with Kevin Shea, the author historian. He's done so many books. So Kevin wrote the history of the Hall. So that would be the second book that featured the building, the institution, the founding, and the anniversary. And then that was the second book. So the third book is The Greatest Collection, which featured or does feature the artifacts at the Hall. So the Hall has the greatest collection of hockey artifacts in the world, and they are the seat. They're the national treasure, as it were, for all of that. So the photos, the institution, and the members, the honored members, and then the artifacts. So the three of them represent the National Treasure series. So the National Treasure in this case would be the Hall itself, and the series would be the series of books.
I first worked with Jim on a charity fundraiser for a Montreal hospital, and he very generously presented me with that series of 3 books, which I, no pun intended, do treasure. And Jim also generously made me an honorary Montrealer, which I don't want any of my Toronto friends to actually know. So I'm sure they're not watching now. But what else is next for Griffintown Media? Anything you can share with us? It doesn't even have to be hockey related.
Yeah, no, we are working with, in this case, we're working with school boards, trying to work with more school boards to bring our app to the level of mainly secondary education and pre-university education. We hope to bring the app to other organizations like museums, where it's a definite fit because you can enhance your museum experience using the app. We do other projects as well on a national level. We're helping to promote, for some industries, human resource recruitment to some industries, because as we know, and especially because of COVID, there's been a great need for workers and new workers to different industries. So we're putting together creative campaigns to reach young people, to attract them to different industries and show them opportunities in different sectors. So it's a bit of a mix, Glenn. So the goal would be, and I love the common theme of this night, which is it's not necessarily the thing, it's the story. So everything we do surrounds building stories and telling stories. And the app is kind of just a thing too, by the way, but the app is meant to bring stories to people. So it's like the rest of our work. We do storytelling through words, technology, graphic design, and basically emotion. That's the goal.
I love storytelling, and I know you do too.
Yeah, it's a fun experience. It's a fun raison d'être. It's a fun reason for being, like to share good stories, Yeah.
Did I miss anything before we call it a night?
Just maybe a quick shout out to Jeffrey Griffith, who is the author of The Greatest Collection. Jeffrey will be present at the card show. He always is when COVID doesn't disallow him. So Jeffrey wrote this book. You will be able to probably, if you're walking the floor, you'll see him or people will point to him because Jeffrey's like a really, really prominent collector. He's one of the foremost Wayne Gretzky card collectors in the world as well. So if you do see him, please approach him because he's the most approachable person there is, and he's really charming. And Jeffrey's a good person to know, and he's helping with the app as well to get some exposure on it. So
and he's a doctor.
Dr. Jeffrey Griffith, yes. And he's the youngest, probably PhD I know. So he's done a lot in his young, is it Jeffrey's 30 years old, perhaps? Sorry, Jeffrey, if you're listening, if you're still 29. But he's probably the most accomplished 30-year-old I know. So he did
his doctorate on hockey.
He did it. He did his master's on hockey. I believe. I believe his PhD is on one of the signatories of the. Is it the Constitution, Glenn? You're American. I apologize. I always mix up the word. The original signatories on the Constitution. Is that correct,
or
is
Declaration of Independence?
Let's call it that. But I apologize to Jeffrey again if he's listening. I probably got that wrong. So.
Well, I apologize for not understanding the metric system. So we're even.
Good point.
Okay, Jim. Thank you again for your patience. You were worth waiting for, and I thank you so much for your time and continued success with the app.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Glenn, and to Paul for extending the warm invitation. Yeah.
Okay. Good night. So that'll do it for Hockey Time Machine. We thank you very much for joining us. We won't have a regular Thursday show next week because I'm headed to Toronto and we've got all the Hall of Fame induction stuff to do, but we'll be taping programs from the Expo that will be airing in coming weeks on Hockey Time Machine. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Good night.